Willys Knight 66B Roadster by Griswold 1930. 87 horsepower, 255 cubic inches inline wide sleeve valve 6-cylinder engine, 3-speed manual transmission with synchro mesh, front and rear leaf spring suspension with Watson stabilizers, and 4-wheel mechanical brakes. Wheelbase, 120 inches. In 1913 the Willys Overland was the number 2 selling automobile in America, just behind Ford. That same year, John North Willys was told by his doctor that he had been working far too hard and should either go abroad or to a sanitarium. Not surprisingly, Willys chose Europe, but he could not stray far from his work. While there, he met Charles Yale Knight. Knight had invented an engine with sleeve valves rather than the usual poppet valves. Willys was neither a mechanic nor an engineer by any means, but he was a hell of a salesman, and he saw potential in the sleeve valve's novelty and promotional possibilities. The sleeve valves were much quieter when operating, but they had a propensity to burn more oil. Ultimately, poppet valves won out, and since 1914 Willys Overland produced more Knight-engined cars than virtually all other manufacturers in the world combined. Although the Willys Knight was within the middle market range, Willys couldn't resist giving his namesake car an upscale edition. The car was introduced at the 1929 New York Automobile Show unstyled by designer Amos Northup, who was better known for styling the handsome Rio Royale. It was Northup who gave the car its distinctive grid work on the doors, which the New York press labeled Platside, and the name stuck. Some 400 of the cars were produced, all with bodywork by Griswold of Detroit, but only 13 survivors are known, according to the Willys Overland Knight Registry. Decades before the desirability of these cars became well known to enthusiasts, they were appreciated by a handful of lovably eccentric gents who rescued those 13 survivors from oblivion and carefully ministered to their smooth, silent Knight engines and attractive styling. Among those men was John A. Wireman, of Ogdenburg, New York, who found chassis number 48892 in the 1940s and carefully restored it in polo white with saddle brown striping. When writing to Roland Breed, of Crookston, Minnesota, Mr. Wireman stated that this car has won prizes at every local and northern NY auto meet. I've set a price of $800 on this car. Breed was further informed that the car had been originally purchased at the 1930 New York Auto Show at Madison Square Garden by a doctor in Messina, New York. Mr. Breed, with attention to detail typical of the man, proceeded to correspond with several persons in the Messina Chamber of Commerce, who indicated that it had, indeed, been owned by a local physician, Dr. Charles F. Prayer, who had bought it off the floor at the show. The car's distinctively unforgettable design and rarity mean that it is very unlikely that there were two Platsides in Messina, and thus, the history of this particular example is known back to its original owner. A decade after their initial inquiry to John Wireman, Mr. Breed and his wife, Elba, elected to purchase the Roadster in 1959, and after the purchase, they proceeded to restripe it in maroon and install complimentary new upholstery, replacing what was, at the time, the original leather. The Breeds dearly loved this car, which served them faithfully for some 2 decades of ownership. When the Willys Overland Knight Registry's Knight Overland Starter ran a special article on the 66B in their January/February/March 1974 issue, the Breed Platside was featured. At the time it had traveled fewer than 20,000 original miles. Mr. Breed passed away in 1976. And the car was inherited by his daughter, Loralia Lopez. Even though she was offered $18,000 at the estate auction, she could not part with her father's beloved automobile, and when the estate was settled, the car was relocated to her home in Ridgecrest, California. In the early 2000s Mrs. Breed's second husband, Larry Harsted, generously agreed to fund the car's body-off restoration, but only if he was allowed to drive it. The family agreed, and the Platside was restored, in the same colors chosen by its earlier owners, by Ed Keefe, of Apple Valley, California. It was then used in several parades, until Mr. Harsted's age caught up with him, and in 2005 the Breed family finally parted with the car they had enjoyed for almost half a century.